This thing, this is a pencil. I don't even have to use it anymore to compose.
It's so vivid.
This is my recording studio.
It means that the songs that I'm working on can really be exactly what I want.
It's not like just a dedicated instrument. It becomes something different for all the different things that I do.
The synthesizer and the computer are going to become the folk instrument of the 80s.
A tool like a computer should be easy to use.
To just be able to start using the programs doesn't take any time at all.
These are all tools for people to get better with.
We took it to the studio and dumped the entire album down in 6 hours. It was quite amazing.
It's latitude. That's what it really represents to me, is more wings, more latitude.
You can do whatever you pretty much can imagine. So now the problem is trying to imagine something, clever.
It seems like every time you pick up a magazine, go to a music store, or play in a recording studio, there's a new piece of equipment to help you get just the right sound. But no matter how the sound of music changes, writing music always seems to come down to one person with a pencil, staring at a piano, trying to imagine how all the parts will sound together. Recently, many musicians have discovered two new tools that together unlock the door to their imagination. A technology called Midi and a personal computer named Macintosh have completely changed the way they write, play, and even feel about their music. Midi, which stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, is the industry communication standard for exchanging musical information between a wide range of electronic instruments and computers. The most basic use of Midi is to connect two instruments together. Play one instrument, and the information about what you're playing is sent to the other instrument, which will precisely mirror your performance. But connect your keyboard to a Macintosh personal computer, and you open up a whole new world of possibilities. Instead of simply mirroring your performance, each part can be developed and played separately. The computer saves the MIDI data using a software program called a sequencer, so you can also play a drum machine, and then a sampler, and of course, another keyboard. Suddenly, you're working out all the parts for a band long before you ever get to the recording studio. You're also about to discover that there's an incredibly wide range of music software available for the Macintosh, like notation programs to print the music after it's written, librarians to organize and customize the sounds for almost any synthesizer, and sound design programs to let you modify sampled sounds. There are programs to set up cues for movie, television, and commercial scores, automate your mixes, even help you learn a new instrument. And because the Macintosh is, well, a Macintosh, it's also very easy to use, which makes it an extremely popular business computer, with powerful business programs to help you promote yourself and your music, all of which makes Macintosh the business computer for people whose business is music.
I've been using Apples now for about 8 years. The first Apple computer was used partly for music. What happened was the guy that was doing my technical work at that time, his name is Brian Bell, he started off with computers the day we bought the Apple II Plus.
We started one step at a time, making little interfaces for drum machines to run in time with sequencers. And everybody said, no one will ever want a drum machine to play with a sequencer. That's absurd.
So many of the things which were impossible have become possible. And so many of those things which have become possible have opened doors to so many other possibilities that now I have a whole arsenal of possibilities that I never even thought of before.
was it another brain? Was it a telephone? What was it? And if I don't really understand the Mac well enough, what if I lose all of this stuff? I'm typing this stuff in. This is my mind going into this thing. And I can't, if I lose this little disc, it's like losing all of your notes for class from the entire year, and you're kind of, oh no. So I had a real phobia about that at first. So I would print everything, or else I would have yellow pads and I'd secretly be writing it down as I was putting it into the Mac and thinking, I never do that anymore. I know how to get it. It didn't take me very long to get that kind of confidence in it. It will seem like your brain is being reflected, but that's a wonderful experience, because it's such a direct thing. It's so flexible and there's so many layers and you can get to them very easily. These are your tools. Your tools will teach you things, They'll teach you things you don't even know you want to learn, And they will. It's just like when you're sitting there playing the clarinet or me practicing the violin, you practice with it, you listen to it, you change it. It is your instrument, period.
MIDI, computers, and synthesizers allow musicians to make music in a way that they've never been able to do before. They can play the music into the computer, they can hear it right back, they can interact with it while they're making it. This kind of power has never been seen in the history of all music making. And because of that, musicians are really drawn to use this technology to better realize their own creative powers.
If you think of...
We find that the students are really drawn by the technology into the act of making music, that they enjoy making music much more with these kinds of tools. And especially the Macintosh is so simple for them to learn and so intuitive to use that they really enjoy coming into the lab as many hours as they can and making music. Down the road, we're going to find that these new technologies are making all sorts of new possibilities for musicians to creatively express themselves.
Sequencers make great tape recorders for MIDI data. You can punch in, play back, even save a lot of time with a handy little feature called Instant Rewind. But that's only half the story. Sequencers also allow you to see and change every part of your music. Change the pitch and duration of an individual note. Create loops of any duration. Select quantize and put the entire rhythm section in time. Transpose parts or the entire piece with the click of a mouse. And if you can change a part, why not change the tempo too? Add to this the option to record parts with a MIDI sax, drums, or guitar, and it's easy to see why sequencing is the most popular music software for the serious composer.
I'm going to load a sequence into the computer and build up from nothing to like a whole band playing at once. Okay? And this involves three things. It involves my MIDI guitar converter, the computer, which is recording the guitar converter, and the synthesizer, which is receiving the MIDI data from the computer and playing the instruments, all the instruments on one synthesizer. And I have it set up so different parts of the string, like this part of the string is sending to the first MIDI channel. And then this part of the string is assigned to channel 2, which I have a little bit of bass. And then in here goes to channel 3, which is some piano notes. You set up a drum beat that you like, you find a bass part, and you repeat that until you think of a good melody. Little strings. And voices. You can be playing your regular guitar through your funky old amp and everything, and have digitally sampled voices, you know, singing behind you, you know, when you're doing it. So it opens up a whole broad range of possibilities. And now all I have to do is a smooth fade out.
The thing I find most exciting about technology and the way it's changing is that everything is becoming more user-friendly. I have my sequencing program here, which works basically as a multi-track tape recorder, but all through Midi. I have the track sheet, where I can keep track of all of my different parts on the different tracks, and then the song editor, which plays along wherever I am in the song so I can follow along. Through the chorus, through the verse, whatever. And then for editing, I have the step editor here, which is basically like a sideways piano roll. The longer bars represent longer notes, and here's the keyboard showing where you are in place. I can edit any individual note simply by clicking on it, and then it shows me exactly what's happening with that note. It makes it very easy to edit and change things to exactly the way I want them to be. When I first got the Mac, I was on tour with Cyndi Lauper at the time, and most of the time when you're on tour, you become a vegetable in between shows. You actually only play about 2 hours a night, maybe. So I bought the Mac and started getting into it, and every night I would set it up in my hotel room, and I got to be quite proficient at it while everyone else was turning into potatoes.
I introduced sequencers to my musical life, I guess about a year ago, and to be perfectly honest with you, I shied away from it for the longest time, primarily because of an attitude, I guess, of being a musician at a time in my life where you were either a good player or you didn't exist, and I worked real hard at trying to be a good player, and I figured if you couldn't play it, you better sit there and practice it so that you can play it, and using machinery wasn't the way to go. So I really copped an attitude about the whole sequencing thing. But what I did is I really kind of shortchanged myself, because that wasn't the idea of a sequencer. The idea of a sequencer was to broaden my musical horizons, primarily as a composer, really. And that's how I use it, and it's become my most powerful tool, and I find myself probably using it, maybe 6 to 8 hours a day at this point. What happened on my first album project using the Mac is that for the first time in my life, I was able to play everything the way that I really felt them. And if a person is capable of writing all the parts, there's a complete circle that's made, and the feeling and the emotion that comes out is quite magical, and it's something that's been missing in many of the projects that I have done in the past.
Ask a writer, and he'll tell you that word processing has transformed the way he writes. The page is always neat, changes are a snap, and retyping is a thing of the past. So why should music be any different? After all, musicians spend a lot of time writing and reading. To begin with, you have complete control over the printed page, because with Macintosh, what you see on the screen is exactly what you'll get on paper. It's easy to transpose parts and to space your music to fit your lyrics. Imagine the possibilities, then see your music in black and white.
In October of '86, I realized there were a lot of kids who knew about computers, and I didn't know a thing about them. So I decided to just get the Macintosh and put it on my credit card. And I was glad that I did, because I started getting a lot of work printing out manuscripts for vocalists. To enter the music in, I enter it in with the mouse. It's very fast, just like typing. And at a certain point, if anything, any phrases are the same, I can just copy and paste them the same way I would with words in a paragraph. And that saves a lot of time. One of the things that happens a lot is a vocalist may decide they sing the song in a certain key. A month later, they sing it in a different key. And it's very easy to just go back into the computer and transpose the whole thing and just print out a new lead sheet. If it had been done by hand, then I'd have to start all over again, charge them all over again, and would take a few more hours. It's changed the way that I write music. I go out of my way to find things to do on the computer.
Buy a few synthesizers and you'll soon have a lot of sounds to keep track of. And trying to customize a factory sound is hardly an intuitive process. A sound librarian editor can usually solve your problems. Thousands of sounds for almost any synthesizer can be organized and recalled. Save all your sounds on a hard disk or a floppy, and you have a complete filing system at a fraction of the cost of other storage devices. And for the first time, you can actually see what your sounds look like. So say goodbye to the little windows and tiny numbers on your synthesizer. With a Macintosh, what you can see, you can change.
Disorder comes very quickly when there's a lot of sounds around, and so the Mac is an incredible tool for ordering the environment that we have here. For instance, this is the disc that I have all my present album stuff on. I'm going to show you how I organize the libraries. Now here's all the libraries, all the TX sounds categorized into these various categories. Let's check out the keyboards first. You see, so it's simple. You just click on them, it sends the sound across, and you can listen. If you sit and work with a piano, you can get the idea of the chords, and then write it down, and you can envision the orchestration. You could say, well, I'm going to have the trumpet play that, you could say, and you can envision it. And so everything you're doing, you're envisioning in your mind, which is fine. It's good to do that. But with Midi, you can actually send have one synthesizer play an actual trumpet sound, and then have another synthesizer play the actual bass sound, so that you can hear your composition and develop it, I think, in a lot more detail.
Samplers allow musicians to capture acoustic sounds from the world around them and then modify them for playback. Not surprisingly, these sounds are called samples. Sound design programs for Macintosh make it easy to fine-tune samples with a speed and precision previously available only on more expensive systems. Cut a sample to precisely edit unwanted sections without a click or pop. Blend two sounds for unique and unusual effects. Actually look at your sounds as three-dimensional waveforms. As you work, you can constantly monitor the sample, so your eyes and ears can work together, which seems only natural when you're dealing with natural sounds.
I guess drummers are kind of moving into uncharted territory because everyone else, it's been mostly keyboard players and guitar players who have been at the forefront or are most usually thought of as using these devices and being able to use Midi. With sampling, you actually have a violin. And you can play the note, and it's a violin, and you don't have to work at it. You can just immediately go to the music. I can just punch up the violin, and there it is, and I can start thinking of a melody. But if I had to spend all day trying to get something to sound like a violin, I'd lose the inspiration to, that I'd want it for. All these things with MIDI, with a computer or a synthesizer or sampling device being able to talk to other instruments, you get to hear things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, which is a good thing for me, I think.
Sound design basically is the process of creating sounds that have never been heard before or sounds that are basically of an unusual nature. For instance, a good example of that is in the Star Trek movie when the Enterprise goes into warp acceleration. There is no sound to represent those areas, and that's where the sound designer comes in to create, manufacture, and process these types of effects. This program allows us to go in and actually manipulate the waveforms and amplitudes of the sound, turn the sound backwards, edit milliseconds out of the sound, virtually dissect the sound in any way possible. We can achieve things that we had never been able to achieve before in the manipulation process of the sound. When you're generating soundtracks and sound effects for films, many functions can be controlled by the Macintosh. For instance, the mixing console is running at the same time that the sequencer's running, and we're running our cue program at the same time. So as we were watching the film, the Macintoshes are running on a timecode source, and they are precisely triggering all these different functions that correspond with the film cues.
By now, you may be starting to think that some of the many programs available from Macintosh might just make making music a little easier. You've probably admired the sharp, clear graphics. Perhaps you've even noticed that all the programs seem to work the same way, which means that when you learn your first program, you've gone a long way towards learning them all. No matter what part of the business you're in, Macintosh can help you promote yourself and your music with graphics programs to help you look as good as you sound, and others to organize your day, keep track of your equipment, and mind your money. In short, Macintosh can really help you clean up the rest of your act.
I started playing, and it started sounding like Pablo Casals playing cello or something, you know, because the Midi was so serious. And it's the first time that I actually got into, you know, stimulated and inspired to to know more about Midi and to piano and to flutes, because it immediately makes your fingers go to a different place that you've ever gone before. You know, if you start thinking like a flute player or like a cello player, it's different position than where your fingers usually, the route is different than we usually take to go home, you know.
It's inspiring. You never know when you're creating what's going to trigger you.
That's where you can really utilize a Mac, you know, to storage a sound that you like and then put more things on it or take off until you have something that is just it's like your handwriting. You know, it's just, that's the most beautiful gift that God gave us, is individuality. You know, that's how to me it needs to be used, to bring forth more your individuality.
The computers and sequences and stuff have been instrumental, I think, in helping us to accomplish a few songs.
All of a sudden, the Midi becomes a necessity rather than a commodity. And that's how I look at it now. You know, I can't ignore it. I got to have it. The way it helps us, it's like carrying a symphony with you in your pocket. That's great, man, because when you hear it sound like that for 4 people, you say, wow.
If you're making your career in music, you'll be knocking on a lot of doors. And when one of those doors opens, you'll want to have everything it takes to march right in, which is where Macintosh comes in. Macintosh is made by Apple Computer, a company dedicated to one extraordinary idea, that using a computer should be a pleasure, not a problem. Our goal is to build computers that can take you as far as you want to go. We know that that's a very long way, and that part of helping you get there is to make the first steps easy. Macintosh, the power to be your best.